Hello, students. I hope you all are doing well. Uh, this lecture is for Texas History 2327. It is September 28, 2020, in the year of COVID, and this is going to deal with the Republic of Texas. So, this is the first lecture of Unit 2. Like I said, I've been a little behind on this, but I'm pretty sure you all have been catching up on your reading and getting ready. So let's start with it. Let's start with the problems that face the Texas Republic, okay? Of course, one of the first things that they still have to worry about is that the Mexican army is still very strong and that a lot of people didn't agree with the terms of surrender that Santa Anna did. In other words, a lot of Mexicans felt that Santa Anna did not have the right to surrender because he did so under duress. I mean, he had been captured, so what did they expect for him to do? To say, I mean, he was going to say whatever they wanted so they wouldn't kill him, okay? Now, Santa Anna is a much misunderstood individual in Mexican history. I'm not going to defend him, but I am going to say that he is demonized more than he needs to be demonized in Mexican history. He's kind of like the Mexican equivalent of Andrew Jackson. Okay, that's what I always see him as, is the equivalent of Andrew Jackson. Now, most of the problems that Texas has right now is financial stability, and the only thing that it has as an asset is land. Foreign diplomacy was another problem. There's no formal recognition from any other nation. The United States hasn't recognized it. So, voters do approve annexation to the United States, but the United States doesn't want them. And the reason that the United States doesn't want Texas is because, number one, uh, it has some debt. Number two, the other problem is going to be there's no clear demarcation on the territorial lines. Okay, there's no demarcation on uh, where the United States ends and where it begins, or where the United States ends and Mexico begins. I'm sorry. I always get the yawns when I start lecturing, and I'm really not that tired, but I do apologize, okay? And the other thing is, well, what are we going to do about slavery? I mean, it's obvious that Texas is known as as an empire of slavery, as coined by and I forgot Randolph Campbell. I'm sorry, in his great book Empire for Slavery, and of course the thought of Mexico attacking the United States. Believe it or not, Mexico had a far superior army at this time. They just couldn't seem to coordinate things fairly well, and there was too much political disarray in Mexico at this time. That's why Mexico had such a hard time. Okay, so remember, retaliation from Mexico, no money, and land as the only real asset, and not a clear definition of what the territorial lines are. Okay? Now, there is a provisional government at the time. Okay, and it's Washington on the Brazos. It's the president, the legislature. There's term limits for the president and legislature. The president could serve more than once, but he couldn't serve concurrently. He had to serve one term and then sit out, and then serve another term and then sit out. So that's the way it was. And that's the way it's going to be for governor also. Okay. Uh, there's also going to be very difficult on amending the Constitution. The Texas Constitution is a quagmire. Okay, one of the longest in the world and one of the most amended in the world. First elections are held in September of 1836. Items on the ballot were, of course, the election of Sam Houston as the first president of Texas, and he's also going to be the first governor when Texas becomes a state. He's going to be around for a while. Now he moves the government to Houston. He goes from Washington on the Brazos and he moves to Houston. It is going to be Lamar, the next president, that's going to move it to Austin to spite Houston. If not, the capital would still be in Houston right now. The problems that he wanted to solve were recognition, financial stability, defense, Indian policy, and land policy. Now, he had a very favorable Indian policy and very favorable land policy. He had a very favorable land policy because uh, he had been one of those individuals that had encouraged individuals to bring uh, settlers in with land, with the idea of giving them land. In addition to that, how else are you going to get people to come in if you don't have something to offer them, which would be land, right? If you don't have money, then you give them land. That's what the Spanish had done before in Mexico in the 15th, in the 16th and 17th century, and that's what they did with the Louisiana Purchase. They sold it at a very low price so they could get people to go there. And at this way, they knew that if they brought people over, they could generate a tax revenue out of the stuff that they were growing. Okay, uh, Houston was also sympathetic with the Indians because he had lived amongst the Indians himself, and he was worried about defense because, hey, well, we got to protect our borders with Mexico, and then financial stability is the most important thing. That you need currency to keep the nascent country going. One of the things that Houston does that's very admirable is that he appoints supporters and opponents to his cabinet, which is a good thing, but sometimes it backfires on you when you do that. And he appointed people like this because he had connections with people that could help him get recognition. And right now, he needed recognition from the United States, okay? That annexation would be impeded as long as he didn't get recognition. Now, as soon as Jackson recognizes Texas as an independent country, all the other countries follow suit except Mexico, okay? So that's what he takes care of first, that Texas is recognized. The second thing that they do is financial security, okay? So what do? Texas doesn't produce anything, doesn't produce any manufactured goods, so they're bringing in goods from abroad. You put a tax on them. And they print money in the form of promissory notes. A promissory note means that whatever note you have will be worth that much when it gets to the bank, or they hope it is, but sometimes it isn't worth that. It's kind of like when you write a check and you tell the person, here, go cash it. That's a promissory note, okay? That doesn't guarantee that the money's going to be there when you get there. Now, if it isn't there and you write a hot check, then it's against the law. You're going to have to pay it or you're going to go to jail, okay? Because that's theft by check, okay? But a lot of people will say, well, at the end of the day, a promissory note is useless. Well, we deal with promissory note, legal tender now. The bearer has the right to cash that for that much, and faith in the money and in our financial system keeps the value of the money there. Okay. Now, another way that he brings up the debt, that he decreases the debt, is that he decreases military strength, so he doesn't have to pay, the people that are in the military, and he cuts spending. At some point, if I'm not mistaken, he's his own secretary. He's doing his own paperwork and stuff like that. Now, defense had to be implemented. So what he does is that he creates militias, okay? And by creating militias, he cuts the army, and by creating these militias, he creates autonomous areas of like small volunteer armies. That's why Texas is so big on local militias and stuff like that. And he also in 1837 creates the Texas Rangers. Now, Indian policy, uh, he favored a peace policy, while most Texans favored just the complete annihilation of the Indians, which is not cool. And as I said before, when it comes to land policy, he gave away the land to attract immigration, and that was very good. The more people you had, more economic activity, more tax revenue, more lands given to people. So it's the more people came in, the more land you gave away or you sold at a very cheap rate. They worked it, they paid taxes, and there's nothing more American and more patriotic in the United States than paying taxes. People that say that we should not be taxed have no clue what they're talking about. Trust me, they're lost. Because without taxes, you would not have public schools, you wouldn't have TCC, you would not have streets, you would not have uh, the police department, you would not have the fire department, you wouldn't have any of those things that we use as infrastructure. Okay, that's what you need to call it. You wouldn't have any parks, you wouldn't have any libraries, all that stuff. It all would depend on uh, uh, money given to the masses by the wealthy, and we know we can't depend on the wealthy. You know, there are a lot of wealthy people that give a lot of money, but there's also a lot of wealthy people that don't. Now, Houston could not succeed himself as president, so MB Lamar, Mirabeau B. Lamar, uh, he follows him. Now, Lamar didn't get to Texas until late. He got here almost at the end of the Texas Revolution. He was from Georgia. He moved to Texas just before San Jacinto. He he wanted to find a financial solution when in reality he only made it worse. He established an education system that we have to give him credit for. Okay, and he established foreign policy. Now, his idea with the Indians was that he wanted to annihilate them. He wasn't real cool about it. He did not like Native Americans at all. He wanted to exterminate them, no ifs, ands, or buts. And he wanted to improve Houston's land policy. In other words, give out more land. Now, I will say one thing. He did not like Houston. Him and Houston didn't see eye to eye. I think another thing that's really bad for Lamar is that he goes out of his way to try and do away with a lot of the policies that Houston did, and he hurts himself in doing so. Like one of the first things he does to smite Houston is that he moves the capital to Austin. So when he moves the capital to Austin, that it's going to be the sixth and final capital of Texas. But I do see it there as, you know, I kind of thought that maybe they'd move it to San Antonio because it's more centrally located. But if you look at Austin, it's right smack dab in the middle of the state, and you know it doesn't really hurt to have it there. So I think that even though he was doing it to spite Houston, the decision to put it there was not a bad one because of the location, okay, and the close proximity to San Antonio, which at the time was the biggest city in Texas. Now, in public education, he had a passion for education because he was a journalist and a poet. Now, what he did is that for every acre that he sold, I mean, he set land aside in every county for schools to be built. Okay, but later on they sell those. It's not really doing a lot of places in other countries, in other countries, in other states in the union, and in counties. You will see that the counties will have one acre of public land for every 3 acres of just regular land. In other words, for every if you have 300 acres of land, then you're going to have 100 acres of land where you can build schools. And it's really can tell you a really cool story. I went hunting in Wyoming one time and I kind of messed up on my permit. And the place that I got my permit in was a place that did not have a lot of public land. And the guy told me, well, the school's not in session right now. It's the weekend, so why don't you go hunting behind the school? And I go like, what do you mean? And he says, well, the school there is really small, and that school there has 5 acres. There's antelope in the school behind the school. You can go shoot one. So I did. I went over there, and sure, he just go get there before it gets daylight, and they'll because they'll be there, and then they move out. So I went over there, and sure enough, there was an antelope there, and I shot an antelope. It was fair game. I mean, it wasn't easy. It took me a while to get to him, but it was truly amazing that they have that. In Texas, we don't have that because most of our land was sold. If you go to places like Colorado and Wyoming and Montana, there is public land to your heart's desire. I mean, you can just park on the side of the road and go hunting. Isn't that cool? Here we sold it all to wealthy people. All right. Now he sets aside land and he establishes two universities. The first university in Texas is Baylor, then the University of Texas at Austin, and of course Texas A&M is also founded later on. Now, foreign policy, he favored independence instead of annexation. He increased the size of the navy, and he does send envoys to Mexico to get recognition. Um, but one of the things that we have to pay attention to, where he really goes bad, is on the Santa Fe expedition. And basically, what he does is that he wants to find a route to Santa Fe without going to El Paso, because El Paso is if you get on 20 from here, you go to El Paso. It leads you to, you're gonna end up 20 is gonna keep on going, but you're gonna go south to El Paso. If you're in San Antonio, 10 takes you directly to El Paso. Okay, so instead of going like from Austin down to San Antonio and then to Eagle Pass and Del Rio and then up to El Paso, and then on up to Santa Fe, it was kind of difficult because you were right here. So you would have to go this way and then down and then across and then up. So what he wanted to do is for there to be a route from Austin straight to Santa Fe. Well, there's not even a direct route from Austin to Santa Fe right now because you got the Texas Hill Country and then you've got some open plains. You've got the Llano Estacado. And what he does is that he borrows money to finance this expedition, and it is an absolute disaster. Okay, there is a Larry McMurtry book about it. I think it's called Comanche Moon, and a lot of these men are preyed on by the Indians, but they're in Mexico. When they get to Santa Fe, they kind of forget that they're in Mexican territory, and the Mexicans aren't being friendly with them. So we're going to talk more about them in a bit. Uh, Indian policy, there were major to Anglo Americans. Native Americans were a major obstacle. Okay, so they increased the size of the army and they build frontier fortifications. This is very expensive because you've got people living out there. You got to send them food. You got to build these. Now there is a war between the Cherokees and the Cherokees and the Chief Bowles. I don't really want you to know too much about it, but know that that's going on with the Cherokee and of course the Comanche. Comanche and the Apache were raising hell. They were never stationary. They were constantly moving. There was complete, retaliation in San Antonio and Austin. All the settlements would get raided. It was not uncommon. Indian raids were not uncommon at this time. Land policy, of course, they're doing what the empresarios were doing. Was it successful? Yeah. And a lot of this stuff was moving west. West of what? West of present day I-35. Okay, and that's what you do. Now we still got financial problems. This guy's got financial problems. Lamar's got financial problems, and he's sending expeditions to New Mexico that are a complete failure. They're not even getting there. I mean, it's just a. I mean, from the get go, they start getting raided, and then the Yeah, I think it's something to the effect that he starts going up north, and then McLeod changes his mind, and he comes back south. I'm not an expert on the Santa Fe expedition. I really should read a good book on it, and you know what? I will. I will read a good book on the Santa Fe expedition. Um, but I just want you to know that it was a disaster, and it was a way to they were trying to find a route from Austin to Santa Fe across the Llano Estacado, and that wasn't going to happen. Okay, it wasn't going to happen at all. It's a pipe dream. Lamar's administration is considered a failure by me and other historians. Uh, I think he was a failure the minute he went upon to take apart Houston's policies. Now, Houston wins a second term easily. Major issues, well, I gotta fix the financial stability here and conciliation with Mexico after Lamar created all these problems with the Santa Fe expedition. I also got to take care of the Indians because they're all pissed off here. Finances, reduce government activities at all costs, eliminate positions, cut salaries. He didn't even draw a salary himself. We got to give that to Houston. I mean, Houston was kind of like all over the place, but at the end of the day, he he had Texas at it. I mean, he dies broke, so he never really takes anything from Texas that he didn't. He attempts to sell the Navy. He was very, very, very frugal with his administration. He pursues peace with the Indians. Um, he reduces the military. No peace with the Indians, by the way. The Indians by this time are very upset. Now, in addition to that, we're going to have some other problem. When Lamar sends the Santa Fe expedition to Santa Fe, New Mexico, the Mexicans get pissed off. So they send this guy the Mexicans send this mercenary by the name of General Adrian Woll. He was actually German, okay? And he comes into San Antonio and he raids the daylights out of that. Comes through Laredo, Zapata. He kind of and this was just punitive, okay? It was just a retaliation to go and show them what's going on. So then what happens is that Houston reluctantly forms the Somerville expedition. Okay, it's also known as the Mier expedition because it ends in Ciudad Mier, Tamaulipas, in Mexico. And what they were going to do is drive the Mexican army out of. They were going to take them to the Rio Grande, and that's it. Now the Mexicans were saying that the Nueces River was the border, and Texas was saying that it was the Rio Grande. Now, what happens is that they invade Mexico. They're very successful in liberating San Antonio, and they're actually very successful in liberating Laredo. But when they cross the river, it doesn't work out for them, and they are caught. Okay, in Mier, and what they have to do is that they have to draw beans. Anybody that draws a black bean gets shot. Anybody that draws a white bean is let go. And, unfortunately, Houston is criticized for that. But what is he supposed to do? I mean, he's doing the best that he can with what he's got. He can't let he can't let the Mexicans come over here and do whatever they want to without any form of retaliation. Now, the bad thing about it is that there's no guarantee of maintaining independence after the Mier expedition. And the United States is still refusing annexation because of the slavery issue. Now, what Houston begins to do is that he starts to talk to the French and the British to see if he can get the United States jealous or worried and say, okay, never mind, never mind. We'll take you. But um, Texas, the United States is concerned about foreign investment in Texas. They don't want the French and they don't want the British in here. There is a failed annexation treaty in 1844. But one of the things that they realize is that James K. Polk is running for president, and he's running on an expansionist agenda. So rather than letting Polk annex Texas, they go ahead and they allow it to be annexed under a joint resolution under John Tyler. Okay, and what happens then is that when Polk is inaugurated, then Texas is admitted into the Union. Okay. Now the last president of the Republic of Texas, is going to be Anson Jones. Actually, a pretty cool guy, and he guides Texas through the annexation period, and we have Texas then finally survived as a republic. Okay. Now, I could go ahead and go on to the next lecture, but I'm not going to, because what I want you all to do is, this is the Republic of. What happened during the Republic of Texas? Not a whole bunch, okay? It's not like there was a lot going on. When we come back, we're going to talk about statehood, okay? And hopefully I'll record that lecture tomorrow night. These lectures will be smaller snippets. Maybe tomorrow I'll condense it into one big lecture. But remember, these lectures are just to help you with your reading and to let you know where we're at. Under no circumstances are you to think that you shouldn't be doing your reading, okay? If you don't do your reading, you're dead in the water, okay? Now, I will leave you. I hope you let me know how you like this lecture. Give me some comments. And of course, like it if you can, but watch it, because I see that a lot of you don't watch them, and it kind of hurts my feelings. I'm just kidding. No, it kind of does, right? But, be kind to each other, wear your masks, and we'll be seeing you. I received word today, a couple of days ago, that we will be going online in the spring. So you guys take care, guys and girls. You all take care. Be kind to each other and wear your masks. Bye bye.